Okay, good morning. Starting with yin yoga today and a seated hip opener. A bolster would be nice for this. If you don't have one, not a big deal, or even a folded blanket, you can do it on the mat on the floor. I'll turn to face you. But if you have something to lift the hips up, try that. So you just bring the hips up onto some kind of cushion underneath you, soles of the feet together, knees wide, and let the hands just slide down. So if the hips are lifted, you're not going to be able to reach as far forward, and you're keeping it easy. So close the eyes, sit up tall, grab onto whatever's right there. Might be the shins. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Exhale out of the mouth. 2 more cleansing breaths like that one. Deep breath in through the nose. Exhale slow as you can out through the mouth. Last one. Breathe in all the way up through the crown of the head. Slowest exhale out through the mouth. Maybe you start to hinge forward with the upper body. Maybe the hands start to slide down closer to the feet. If you can grab the feet easily, great. And if the feet and the hands connect, then maybe the elbows flare out a little bit. They can rest on the shins. You can let the head and the neck go. Rounding of the spine is okay. Staying with your Ujjayi breath in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. So as you focus on the breath, feeling the shape start to take over the body. Similar to the way you fall deeper into sleep, falling deeper into the pose, just gradually, without any force, letting it pull you in. Take one more big inhale in through the nose. Slowly back out through the nose. Begin to lift the head and the chest back up, coming back up to seated. Bring the hands to the outer knees to help the knees back together. And we'll come forward on our stomach. You'll need the bolster. So come to hands and knees first. Take the bolster, put it the wide way underneath you. You can also do this one without the bolster. It's Sphinx pose. Forearms come down to the mat, elbows ahead of the bolster on the mat. Then walk the feet back behind you. Set the hips down onto the mat. So hips touch the mat. Pubic bone touches the mat. Tops of the feet just rest back behind you. And then you can start to push the chest forward. Look down the bridge of the nose. Eyes can be open or closed. So you had the legs bent in a hip opening before. Now you have the legs stretched back behind you and working our way into a back bend. So those bottom tips of the shoulder blades are what help you push the chest forward, but try not to put too much effort into it. You just want to find the shape like you did in the last pose, butterfly. Be in it with the breath. Chest stays lifted. And that's what's nice if you are using a bolster is you don't have to use as much effort. The bolster keeps the chest lifted. But if you aren't using a bolster, you're just lying down on the mat, that works too. Last deep breath here. Deep inhale in through the nose. Slowly back out through the nose. And blink open the eyes if they're closed. You'll need to remove the bolster off to the side. So it's best to just come back to hands and knees. Scoot the bolster off to the side. You won't need the props. So you'll come back to lying down on your stomach. And you will stack the hands one on top of the other. Just rest the forehead on top of the hands. Feet can relax. So that might mean that the ankles, the outer ankles roll out a little bit. Toes can point in at one another. So this is still a back bend, but it's more subtle than the one that you were in before. And we'll start to get into the shoulders and also the hips, depending on where you end up with this. So lifting the head up, bring the arms out in a T shape. So hands in line with the shoulders, and then bring this left hand in. So it's right underneath that left shoulder on the mat if you're using one. Looking to the left, set the head down onto the mat. And then bring the feet together. They don't have to be all the way touching, but close. Press into the left hand. Start to roll back onto this right shoulder. So maybe you're coming onto the side of the right hip if your shoulder's okay with that. So legs are still down, extended out toward the back of the mat. And what you might find here is that top foot could be used as support depending on how far away you are from the mat. So you could play with tapping the left toes forward, see if that helps you stay in the same shape. If it doesn't and it brings you closer to the mat, bring that left foot back behind you. So it's behind the right leg. See if that gives you a little bit of support. And if you're looking for more of a hip opening, I'll give you another option to add to this. If you're good here with the shoulder open, you can stay like that. Some people like to bring the sole of the left foot back behind them and the knee would point up. So that deepens everything. There's a little bit of a hip opening. It deepens the shoulder opening. If it's too much, just keep that left leg extended so it's not bent. Then close the eyes if that's restful for you. Come back to the breath if you've been focused on getting yourself set up and letting the body just breathe on its own. And if you find over time that you need to make an adjustment with the legs, don't feel like you have to stay in the same place. You can always move that left foot around to make things deeper or gentler. If you have the sole, the left foot on the ground behind you, start to extend it back out. Wherever you are, stack the feet. If you have one foot in front or behind the other, come back onto your stomach, finding center. This time, left arm goes out to the side. Right, make sure the hand's in line with the shoulder. That's important before you put weight on it. Right hand comes to the mat just underneath the right shoulder. Turn the head to the right, rest the side of the head down onto the mat, roll back onto this left shoulder. That right hand's just wherever it goes for support. So it might be closer in toward the body. It depends on how far back the hips go away from the mat. Move that right foot around once you get a handle on the shape on this side. And you find first focusing on the shoulder where you get the best opening to start. And then you can start figuring out the feet after that. So either behind the left leg, in front of the left leg, or maybe sole the right foot to the ground behind you, right knee points up. That might add a deeper shoulder opening and also a bit of a hip opening. You'll start to stack the feet and the legs if they're not already. Come back onto your stomach, rolling back to center. Bring the hands underneath you, just on the side of the rib cage. Come back to hands and knees. Grabbing your bolster if you have one. We're coming into child's pose. You can definitely do child's pose without a bolster. Big toes together, knees apart. Bring the bolster if you're using one just between the knees, not any farther back than that. So you have something to rest the head on. And then you can start to come forward with the torso, turn the head in one direction, rest the head down. So heart's lengthening forward, chest is lengthening forward if you have the bolster underneath you. Hips are going back toward the heels without much force. And you're definitely listening to the knees. If they need more space, don't feel like you have to bring the hips all the way back. You want them to be happy in the shape too. Elbows are heavy on the mat, forearms, hands are relaxed. And if you have the head turned in one direction, lift it, turn it the other way if the neck's okay with that, evening things out. If it doesn't work out, you can always go back the other direction. You'll start to lift the head up, coming back up to hands and knees. Turn the bolster so it's the wide way underneath you. You're coming back to tabletop. This time, if you have two blocks, that might be nice. You can just keep the hands on the mat. If you don't, that's fine. But if you do have two blocks, bring them up to the tallest height. Just makes the transition a little bit easier. And you want the blocks to be wide on the closer to the outer edges of the mat. Step the right foot forward. So you're coming into a lunge. So that right foot goes forward. This bolsters up against the left thigh if you're using it. And then you can start to push the hips forward, lift the chest, hands are on the blocks. If that's the case, then your chest is lifted up higher. If the hands are on the mat, then the chest is much lower. You could come up onto the fingertips if you want to. Close the eyes if you're comfortable with that. And we're back in the hips again. The whole point of yoga, any kind of yoga, is to calm the fluctuations of the mind. And stillness is one way to get there. Yin yoga is naturally a practice that has a lot of stillness in it. We find different shapes, we stay there for a while, we focus on the breath. And for some of us might be easier than sitting still for an entire hour in a meditation seat. So many different ways through yoga and other activities to just be an observer of your own mind, not participating in any thoughts, accepting that they will keep going one after another, but maybe with more stillness or yoga, there's more space between the thoughts the more we practice. If the eyes are closed, start to blink them open. Shift the hips back, bring that right knee back underneath you. We'll go straight over to the other side. It'll feel really good. So bring that left foot forward, right knee still down on the mat, back behind you, and you want that bolster up against the right thigh. It's the slightest thing to do that gives you a little bit of support. Find where you want the chest. If the blocks are up high, maybe you keep the chest up high. That can feel nice. Close the eyes. You can put as much weight as you want into the blocks. Feeling that stretch on the right hip now. So you had that right foot forward on the other side with the crease in the hip. Now you're opening up that crease on the right side. You're bringing that opening over to the left side. Stay here with your breath. Eyes open or closed. There's so many different types of breathing exercises, and all those are to give your mind something to do. So it helps you not get lost in anything, helps you concentrate, focus, slow things down. Last couple of deep breaths in this shape. You'll blink open the eyes, start to shift the hips back enough so you can get that left knee back onto the mat. If you have your hands on blocks, just bring the hands back down to the mat, setting the blocks off to the side, still within reach. Bring the hands down to the mat ahead of the shoulders, tuck the toes, bolsters right where it needs to be. Downward facing dog is a transition. So we'll take this to single pigeon, getting deeper into a different spot in the hip. Reach the right leg up and back. It's an easier way to get that right shin forward. So now bring the right shin forward. If you're using the bolster, it goes ahead of the bolster. So the foot's on the mat. Then you start to shift side to side with the hips until you feel like the bolster supporting the hips evenly. Top of that left foot, the back foot can just rest on the mat. It doesn't need to do anything. And this right foot can go all the way up against the bolster. It doesn't need to come all the way forward. You want to find something that works for this right knee and is easy on the hip. Maybe you start to come down lower with the chest and the arms. Here's where the blocks can be really helpful. They can go underneath the head, so you can make something with the blocks to rest the head on. I like going lower. I like a block underneath my chest. Most people don't. And then a block underneath the head. So find something that works for you. Come into the shape to start an easy place. And this isn't our first hip opening, so you might be a little deeper than you typically would in your single pigeon. And if it bothers that right knee or it's just not working, you come on your back and you do thread the needle, right ankle to the left thigh. And it's the same hip opening with less weight and way easier on that knee, the right knee, if you have any issues there. And we'll start to bring ourselves back up. If you have blocks that you're using, set those off to the side so they're out of the way. Work your way back up onto your hands. Tuck the back toes, lifting that back knee up, lift the hips up, bring that right foot back behind you. You can either pedal out the feet to get the circulation back in that right leg, or you can play with moving that right leg around however you want. You can do circles with the knee going in one direction and then maybe going in the other. But some movement is nice after a long hold like we just did. Then you'll make your way back to downward facing dog, both feet down. Lift the left leg up and back, look forward, bring that left shin ahead of the bolster or just up ahead of the hips if you're not using a bolster. Shift side to side until you feel the bolster evenly supporting both hips. Top of the back foot, right foot just rests down on the mat. And then you can start to walk your way down toward the mat if the left knee's okay with it, if there's enough space in the hips. You feel it right away when you come into it. There's more weight on the hip opening in your single pigeon, which can feel amazing for some of us, and others, we need to come on our back and do thread the needle. Maybe it works on one side, it doesn't work on the other. Taking care of the body and whatever it needs. It doesn't need the same thing on both sides all the time. Ideally, it's great if things are symmetrical, but most of us aren't. We don't use our bodies that way, so we have to adjust. Using blocks if you'd like for more support. Don't feel like you have to do the same exact thing you did on the first side. Take a deep inhale in through the nose and back out through the nose. Start to lift the head, chest back up, slowly working your way back up onto your hands, setting any blocks off to the side if you're using them. Hands underneath the shoulders, tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, step that left foot back. Whatever you need to do to move around that left leg, maybe pedaling out the feet or trying those knee circles if that worked well on the first side. Setting that left foot down to the mat, knees down to the mat. Once you come back to tabletop, turn the bolster so it's the long way in front of you again. Back to hands and knees. Knees go over to the left. You're sitting on the right hip, and the right hip's all the way up against the bolster. Your knees are just bent. You could put a blanket between the knees if you want some extra padding there. And then you'll start to walk the hands down. So you're lying the torso down onto the bolster. And once you get the head low enough, right before you set it down, you could look to the left and then rest the head down on the bolster if the neck's okay with that. So you're coming into your twist. Close the eyes. If the neck doesn't like it, then turn the head to the other direction, and you'll have the nose and the knees going in the same direction. If it's okay the other way, it's deeper. Maybe you stay there, knowing you can always go back the other way whenever you want. We'll lift the head back up, bring the hands in, coming back to seated with the right hip down on the mat. Easiest way to get out of this and transition to the other side is take this right hand over to the left, then turn around so you're seated facing away from the bolster. Bring the knees all the way over to the left, and now you're on the left hip. Left hip all the way up against the bolster. Left hand goes outside of the bolster. Knees and legs are bent. Lengthen the chest, start to walk the hands and the arms forward. Once you get the head low, see how it feels to turn the head to the left and then rest the head on the bolster. Maybe that's where you stay. Elbows can flare out. Let the arms be totally on the mat from the elbows down. And start to blink open the eyes. Walk the hands in so you can lift the head and the chest up. And this time you'll come to seated facing forward. So set the bolster off to the side of the mat. Bring the legs out in front of you. You'll come down to your back, but you want blocks near you if you have them, a bolster near you. So blocks outside the hip, bolster outside the hip. Again, you don't need any props. If you don't have any, they're just an option. Come down onto your back. Start with the soles of the feet on the mat. Just feel the head on the mat, the upper back on the mat, arms down by the sides, palms facing up. Extend the legs down in front of you. Feet are a little wider than hip width distance apart. Reach the arms overhead, come into a long stretch, stretching out through the arms and the legs. Then clasp opposite elbows overhead. Let the arms rest. And it could be opposite elbows. It could be more like opposite wrists. Just see where that clasp happens without much effort. Take the right foot, hook it on top of the left foot. Legs are straight, just the feet are hooked. And if it feels like that left leg is out too far, bring it in toward the center until you feel comfortable. Lift the upper body up and over to the left, not as far as you can. And then set the head down. Both shoulder blades are still touching the mat. Both hips are also touching the mat. And you have this banana shape in the body. Pose is called banana. Close the eyes. Now you just rest here. So with the feet hooked, you're feeling that length happen on the right side of the body, up through the side body, on the torso side, maybe even that right shoulder. But you're still getting length on the other side of the body, the left side. Start to settle into the shape. See where you can ease up and let go of any effort, especially with the way the feet are hooked. You can let go of the legs. There is a nice shoulder opening that happens here with the arms clasped overhead. One more deep inhale in through the nose. Keep it as long as you can. Slow exhale back out through the nose. Keep going, keep going. Start to lift the upper body up, bring it back to center, uncross the feet. Remember which forearm's on top. Stretch the arms overhead, get long. Now switch the clasp of the forearm. So bring the other forearm on top. Lift the upper body up and over to the right. Hook the left foot on top of the right foot. and you're back in on the other side. See where you can let go now that you have the arms hooked and the feet hooked. Both hips, both shoulders, back of the head, all on the mat. And start to lift the upper body, head back up, bring it back to center, uncross the legs, stretch the arms overhead once more, and bring the arms down by the sides. Walk the feet in, soles of the feet to the mat. If you have a bolster, take it, put it underneath the head as like a pillow. So it's supporting the neck and the head. And if you have blocks, take the blocks on the lowest height, the widest way, bring them underneath the thighs. So you want the legs to be wider than hip width distance. It'll elevate the knees away from the mat, heels rest down on the mat. Then arms come down by the sides, palms face up, close the eyes, take a deep breath in through the nose. Sigh it out the mouth, let it go. Now let go of that breath control, coming right into Shavasana. And start to wiggle the fingers and the toes, getting some movement back into the body. Walk the feet in, bending the knees, soles of the feet to the mat. If you're using blocks, set those off to the side so they're out of the way. Roll over to your right side, keeping the head on the pillow if you're using one. Otherwise, cradling the head in the arms. Using the hands, bring yourself up to a comfortable seat. So we'll actually close class today with a seated meditation. We have time for it. You could prop yourself up on a block, a bolster. You could stay seated on the mat. I like bringing the hips up onto a block, and then maybe finding a cross-legged seat, however you're comfortable. Close the eyes, sitting up tall. We're doing this meditation for the same exact amount of time we held all of those poses. So you'll come right back into stillness. Bring the chest up, pubic bone down toward the mat. Point the tip of the nose forward and down a little bit. Shoulders away from the ears. Palms can rest down on the legs, or you can rest the backs of the hands on the legs and turn the palms to face up, whichever one feels best. You're coming into an observer state of mind, just watching the thoughts go by, or maybe looking at all the space you made. You can stay with the same breath exercise that we've been doing, Ujjayi breath in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. Feeling the effects of your practice. Maybe observing a slowness of the mind. Maybe feeling more inner peace. Sitting with that. The comfort of it. And how natural it feels. If you're in a good place with your meditation, I encourage you to keep going. If that's all the time you have, bring the hands together in front of you. Slight bow of the head. Take a moment to honor and acknowledge your heart and your spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bringing the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Hope that meditation felt good. That's what our physical yoga practice is for, to help make that easier. It's a challenge for most of us, so we have tricks to help us. That's one of them. All right, enjoy your day.